Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to SF Commons. Tonight we're bringing back Elizabeth Lee Beck, the counsel for the plaintiffs for the DNC fraud lawsuit. The lawsuit against the Democratic National Committee and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was the chair of the Democratic National Committee. Going back to 2016, the Bernie Sanders supporters felt as though and believe that the election was rigged in favor of Hillary Rodham Clinton, who obviously lost the election to President Donald Trump. And as the case went, there are cross motions that has gone back and forth with the court, and now we are with the appeals court, and Elizabeth Lee Beck will tell us all about it. Hi, Elizabeth. How are you doing?
Hi.
Okay, welcome back. Where are
Welcome.
you now? Where are you now with the case? So you got the order from the court granting your motion to amend the complaint, right? And previously, the court dismissed the case on two grounds. Is jurisdictional, that there's an issue of standing the cause and fact injury element, and also there was an issue with regards to the citizenship between the different parties. The defendants and the plaintiffs have to meet the minimum citizenship requirement in class action lawsuit, right? Okay, so take it from there.
Yes, the lower court unfortunately dismissed the case on a number of grounds. One of the grounds is the court opined that cases of this nature, right, voters or donors to a candidate in a political campaign cannot sue in a court of law. As a matter of fact, the lower court said that, and I'm paraphrasing here, you don't have legal redress. Your relief is in the ballot box.
Yeah, well,
that was what the court said. And that was one issue that has not been resolved yet in the appellate court. But the lower court also raised other concerns. One is it doesn't touch upon whether cases of this nature even belongs in court. Federal courts are courts of limited jurisdiction. They do not take any and all cases. They only take certain types of cases. One way, historically, cases have gone into federal court was when all the plaintiffs and all the defendants were citizens of different states. When you have a resident of, say, Wisconsin sued in Florida in federal court, actually in any court, by a Florida resident, because they have different citizenship,
right,
that Wisconsin resident can remove to federal court.
right.
He or she can get that case in federal court, assuming that certain minimal amount in controversy and other things are met. The question here is that we have 150 plaintiffs, and I believe one of them certainly may be in the same state as Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Okay, so we certainly don't have a situation where all the plaintiffs and all the defendants are citizens of different states. But a few years ago, Congress passed a law which has been called the Class Action Fairness Act. And the Class Action Fairness Act allows defendants, and this only applies in class actions. It expanded the types of cases that federal courts are obligated to hear. And under CAFA, and that's the Class Action Fairness Act, you don't need complete diversity. And by making a few word changes, such as instead of living, calling it residence, which is true. Schultz does reside in Florida. It was plaintiff's position that under CAFA, because this is a class action, under the most recent congressional passed by Congress under CAFA, we do belong in federal court. And that was an issue that the lower court had brought up. And I remember addressing it and saying, with all respect, we disagree with the lower court that there is no jurisdiction here because under CAFA there is. Agreed with us, but it is allowing us to amend the complaint and proceed on that ground. They certainly didn't have to do that, but they are allowing us, they're giving us leave to amend. And of course that short circuits effort and paperwork and red tape. So it gets to the right result faster. Because if they dismissed, then what presumably might have to happen is we would have to refile in the lower court with the word changes, which are not a big deal, right? We're just changing the words.
Right.
And then what's going to happen? We're going to have to go through the whole rigmarole again.
Right.
They're going to have to file the motion to dismiss. It's going to go up on the same issues, but without that jurisdictional issue.
Right.
That prolongs everything, requires a lot more effort and resources from everyone.
Right.
So here, we got to the right result in a very abbreviated fashion. So we're gratified that the appellate court agreed with us on the jurisdiction, and secondly, exercised their discretion and is allowing this appeal to proceed.
And let's talk about the standing. The other issue is standing. To file a case in federal court, there has to be a actual case of controversy. We're talking about that there has to have been an injury, that there has to be reversibility, meaning the court can redress this particular injury, and there has to be causation. So can you talk about the standing issue? I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the court was talking about that the pleading did not meet the requirement regarding causation. So can you talk about that?
Causation is but for the actions of the defendant would the injury have occurred.
The court said that, yes, she said this, Debbie Wasserman Schultz said this, that they're fair and that they're neutral, and that based on that representation there was a reliance on the part of the Bernie Sanders supporters, and based on that representation they gave Bernie Sanders campaign money, and of course that's a misrepresentation, it's false, and that's where the lawsuit, really the fraud aspect of the lawsuit is, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, in fraud cases, you believe something that's pitched to you,
right,
and sold to you and represented to you, and as a result of that you suffer a loss, and that was and what was represented to you was not true. I do know that the lawyers for the DNC and Debbie Wasserman Schultz stood up in court and speculated that even if they had told all their voters that they rigged the election, I mean, he actually said something along the lines of, I think that would make people donate even more. He would donate to a rigged race. But exactly. That's what he said. But I think he was trying to make a ridiculous argument to show the causation issue.
Which
is, how do you prove causation? I have two responses to that. One is, under case law, in certain circumstances, causation is not a requirement. It's assumed. Okay, so you can see this in other types of lots of money fraud cases, Bernie Madoff, another Bernie, but not as much liked. Bernie Madoff defrauded so many people of their savings.
Right.
Because he basically represented himself as being a money manager, an investment manager of the highest caliber.
Right.
Instead of a guy running a Ponzi scheme.
Right.
I mean, that was the truth. And so he made the representation and people gave him money. Okay. So it would be ridiculous to say, well, they would have given him money anyway, even if he told them that he was a Ponzi schemer.
Exactly. Exactly. So let me ask you something.
But that is something that has not been briefed yet. So that's going to happen as this appeal progresses.
Right.
But I do want to talk about the difference between standing and jurisdiction.
Okay, sounds good.
So jurisdiction has more to do with the court, and standing has more to do with the people and the companies in court. So I'll give you an example. If you are a French citizen taking a vacation in Ireland, and you are hit by a cab driver who is a young Italian man, and you break a leg, you absolutely have an injury. Okay, you have a legal claim. Somebody just hit you and broke your leg.
Yeah.
But you cannot sue in an American court. That court doesn't have jurisdiction. You can't come to the United States and say, I really like American courts. They're fast. And you cannot sue that Italian driver who hit you, a French national, in the streets of Ireland. Okay, that's jurisdiction. But they're standing, just not in American courts.
Yeah.
You have an injury.
Right.
I'll give you an example. You, Myrna, are talking to your neighbor, and your neighbor has been slapped with a tax bill from the city of San Francisco. And they're confused. You're looking at their tax bill, and it's outrageous. The city is robbing them blind. Okay?
Yes.
It's outrageous. This is your city. This is your tax board. And they are robbing your neighbors blind. Who knows why? Okay? But they're not robbing you blind. But your neighbor is very nice, but they're kind of scared of the courts. They don't want to sue. So you're like, I'm going to sue for you. Myrna Lim, on behalf of John Smith, who is her neighbor, files the San Francisco tax board.
I like this example.
A highway robber.
Right.
You have no standing. Okay, so the court has jurisdiction.
Right.
Well, at least certainly the state court. Okay, they can definitely hear that dispute, but you are not the right person to bring it.
Exactly.
You may be outraged, but the court does not see that as injury that allows you to bring a lawsuit.
Exactly.
So in this case, we dispensed with one, which is jurisdiction. So it does belong in court if there is a case at all. Okay, that's what we dispensed with. It's that whole Italian, Ireland, that issue. Okay, but now we have another hurdle, which is injury. Were the plaintiffs and the class members really injured? See, injury in real life and injury in court are two different things. Because people injure each other's feelings all the time on Twitter.
I see.
Injury is real.
I see some of your I see some of your activities on Twitter, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, people say things to me on Twitter. I say things to other people on Twitter. I see other people talk to each other on Twitter. It's mean.
Oh, amazing.
Each other's feelings. Okay? That some people make it so that a court recognizes as standing. Okay. So, what the lower court has said is that this type of injury, it's not ready to agree with the plaintiffs and say that it's the type of injury that a court can address. Because remember, hurt feelings, generally, courts don't hear those cases. You may meet diversity jurisdiction, but if you accuse your neighbor of hurting your feelings, it doesn't belong in court. Right?
Exactly.
So is this fraud case where the DNC, Americans, that they were running a primary, and it's a fair primary, an unbiased primary, which is written in its charter, and chairperson, Congressperson Debbie Wasserman Schultz, said on national TV that they were being fair. And folks donated to candidates, in this particular instance, Bernie Sanders. Is that a hurt feelings case? Or is that a Bernie Madoff case?
It's a good analogy, yeah.
That's the question. But this type of case, if you make it very narrow, I mean, fraud cases have been filed for hundreds of years. Lying to someone to get money out of them is as old as the hills. But I don't think in the history of the United States, legal jurisprudence, a specific type of this case has ever been filed where people who donated to a particular candidate sued a national party for fraud, for rigging the election. That's the damages here.
How much?
$250 million.
Wow. Okay. Whew.
Actually, if you look, it's actually not that much money if you look at how large corporations do business. They routinely do multi-billion-dollar deals. It is a lot of money. It's actually a shocking amount of money, considering that it's an aggregate of so many people donating an average of $27.
That's right, because Bernie Sanders got $228 million.
Yeah, it's $250 million practically.
I see. Interesting. Now, how about Debbie Wasserman Schultz?
I don't know what her net worth is.
But she's being sued.
But she shouldn't have that much money.
You're suing her as an individual, though, right?
Some of those Congress people are extremely wealthy after a lifetime in Congress.
We don't want to go there, right? You're suing her as an individual, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Okay, all right. So then, in this appeal, the appeal stands on both parties against the DNC and Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz is campaigning for re-election, yeah?
I assume she is. Both defendants are represented by the same attorneys.
Oh, okay. Defendant
Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz does not have her own counsel.
Right.
Her lawyer is DNC's lawyer.
Yeah, makes sense, right? Because supposedly she did it in her capacity as chair of the DNC, so that makes sense. Just to clarify to the audience that at this stage of the case, unfortunately, you cannot conduct discovery, right? If you can explain
forget
that.
Discovery. I really have to repeat that the case has been dismissed.
Right.
That means the case is dead. An appeal will resurrect it.
Right.
So we're talking about a dead case.
Right. Right. Okay, well.
And the odds of appeal are low.
Right.
Odds are forever never in your favor on
right.
appeal.
Right. It begs the question of, do we really live in a democracy? And I know you want to focus on the legal issue. At this moment, 60% of the American people, the American voters, believe that we should have a third major party. There's a movement for a People's Party.
Yes.
And then 81% of the millennials believe in a third party. The sad part of it is you have two witnesses who died or killed mysteriously. Seth Rich and Shawn Lucas.
This case is in a class by itself, Myrna. Yeah. I've just seen a case. Yeah, this is a case where it lasted a little over a year, and during that time span, 2 young men were reported to have died suddenly. One passed away. He literally dropped dead shortly before he was supposed to testify in our case. That was the process server, Shawn Lucas. And Seth Rich, that's an undisputed murder. He was gunned down, reported to be shot to death in the streets of Washington, D.C. Still unsolved. And it was classified as a botched robbery. But all his belongings were on him,
right,
including his wallet. He just kind of shot him and ran off. Who knows what's going on? But Donna Brazile, in her book, I didn't read her book, but this is what somebody told me. She is the replacement chair of the DNC after Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigned suddenly. And of course, Ms. Brazile was caught feeding debate questions to the Clinton campaign prior to a debate on CNN between Congressman Senator Bernie Sanders and Secretary Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
So despite all that, she still wrote a book and came out and said, I didn't know anything. It's all shocking, all this collusion. But she went on to say that the death of Seth Rich haunts her, and it made her paranoid. The untimely passing of a staff person in your organization. But she also went on to say that it made her paranoid. Like, why would it make her paranoid?
Exactly. Oh, the book. It's called What Happened.
What Happened?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining Elizabeth and I tonight. And we'll see you soon. Again, thank you, Elizabeth, for such an eye-opener, such a smart, thoughtful, analysis of the law and the politics of the U.S. today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us, and good night.